So, one of the things in history that's been a question was just how so many people in 1940s Germany went along with that fascist party that was committing genocide. And one of the studies that attempted to analyze that was the Stanford Prison Experiment. And this was a psychological experiment where they had college students acting as prisoners and jailers. And the whole idea was just to see what would happen. And this experiment ended up being stopped prematurely because of the barbarity of the people in this experiment and how out of control it was getting. And people were actually being harmed. And a lot of people took that to mean that it was a reflection that pretty much anyone could be turned into somebody like that party in Germany during World War II, just by the circumstances. However, there's been a lot of argument to that and how they selected the candidates. And were the people they selected kind of predisposed to behave in certain ways because they chose to take that role as a prison guard? But if we were going to assume that, then we would have to assume that about anyone that applied to be a prison guard in real life or applied to be a police officer or anything of the like in law enforcement. And is that the case? Well, one might argue that there might be that element where that personality type might not be so trusted. And maybe that's why we have all the abuses. But I'd like to examine another aspect of it, which would be the system and who's running the system. Because there's a lot of prisons that run just fine. But if you have one that the leadership is corrupt and doesn't really care about abuses, then guess what happens? There are abuses. And a good example of that would be the Abu Ghraib scandal, where the main problem was lack of supervision and the leadership just not seeming to care what happened. But we can also look at it on a wider scale, as in our entire system, where we seemingly have safeguards against abuses, like most law enforcement has to swear an oath to uphold the Constitution and to protect the American people. However, what we've been seeing is that if there's somebody at the top telling them, no, you're gonna follow these rules, something that violates the Constitution and violates our rights, then yeah, anyone that decides to go against that kind of seems to be picked off, right? Oh, you don't want to obey our orders to violate the American people's rights? Then you're a whistleblower and you're gone and replaced with somebody that will violate the American people's rights. So what does that do other than send a signal to everybody else in that law enforcement agency that if they do the right thing and uphold the Constitution and defend the American people, then they might be the next one on the chopping block for daring to go against the leadership and their commands to do unethical things and to violate their oaths. So is it really about human psychology and us being barbaric naturally, or is it a situation where we have a system that is top down and doesn't actually provide a way for people to be honest without them being kicked out of the system were prized against. And I'm going to say that's a dangerous situation, considering the people at the top in our government seem to be all about that same activity that was going on in 1940s Germany, right? All about committing genocide. And those are the people giving orders to our law enforcement and our federal agencies.